Welcome to the Wealthability Show, where we're always discovering how to make way more money and pay way less taxes. Hi, this is Tom Wheelwright, your host, founder, and CEO of Wealthability. So we are in a healthcare crisis right now. We are also in a wealthcare crisis. And what most people don't understand is that the same principles that provide for great health also provide a mechanism for building great wealth. And today we have the expert on this topic. Absolutely, in all the world, we have the expert, Dr. Radha Gopalan. And Radha is a good friend of mine. He's taken personal care of me as a physician. And Radha, just so great to have you on this call. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Tom. Thank you so much for having me on this show. I'm excited to share some of the information with you and your viewers. Great to be here.
I appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about you, Radha, because you have a really an amazingly diverse background. And I would just love the listeners to get an idea just what kind of background you've got, because it is truly unique.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I was born and bred at my young age in Sri Lanka and was exposed to some of the cultural, religious aspects of it, as well as the health and lifestyle of being healthy. From there, I moved on to England, lived in London for about 5 years, spent a total of 5 years in London, looked at the European way of health and the principles. From there, moved on to the Caribbean, lived in Grenada for about a cumulative time period of about 2 years. From there, I came to the United States. This is all pursuing my Western medical aspect. When I was in London, I spent about 3 years in London itself, working as an acupuncturist. In my early stages of medical school in Sri Lanka, I learned acupuncture. So collectively, some of those experiences and pointers and depth that I would be discussing today is drawn out of Eastern philosophies and principles of health. And obviously, I'm a Western medical practitioner. I am a heart transplant cardiologist in one of the university institutions in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's interesting to mix and compare and contrast both of these aspects of health, and then obviously extending that to why these principles and thought process is going to serve as the same principles to build wealth.
No, I appreciate that, Radha. So Radha, your book is Second Opinion, and this is a great book. It's I've read it, and it is, and I've been fortunate because Radha and I both hang out with Robert Kiyosaki every Friday, and so I'm very privileged to hang out with Radha, and I've heard a lot of this in seminars and so forth from you, Radha. What I'd like to do is I'd like to actually walk through. You go through several principles and types of disease. Okay, and you go to each different organ and types of disease and what the emotional kind of state is in order for that disease to take hold. Can you just kind of give us a little background? Then let's just walk through one by one, because what I want to do is, what I noticed as I was reading your book is that all of these areas, as you talk about this emotional intelligence for health and what it takes, they all have an impact on building wealth, and which is my expertise. And so I if you would just give us a kind of a broad overview, and then let's get into one by one, maybe starting with things like cancer and heart disease, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very interesting. The premise here is the second opinion. The book is about being. So it's based on the being, doing, and then having principle, be, do, have principle. The entire book is devoted to who you are being is what's going to drive who you become and how successful you are, whether it's the world of health or wealth. So the book dwells on different diseases and different beings and how that directs the path of the health of an individual, the same can be equally drawn on the wealth side. So it's about being rather than doing. And then obviously, your being drives doing. It's a very interesting interaction, Tom, between being and doing. In order to be, you actually have to do things. And in order to do, you have to be a certain type of person. So it is not mutually exclusive. It's actually inclusive. And they both have to be equally paid attention to. But at the end of the day, what wins is how you are being. And I think I can see from your viewer's perspective how they are being, and I'm sure you have more knowledge on this, how they are being is going to what determine ultimately how successful you are in the wealth space.
For sure. So what I've learned over the last 20 years, spending time with Robert and Kim Kiyosaki, and you, and all the other advisors and everybody else around, is that building wealth is as much about is very much about personal development. It's very much about who you are and your capacity for building wealth. It's not about, you can't do it. It's like context and content, right? So context being, the glass, and content being what goes in the glass. Well, you can't fill the glass unless the glass has a solid foundation, unless it, if it has cracks, et cetera, then you're not going to be successful. And you got to make sure you got a big enough glass. So what we're talking about today is a lot of the context. We talk about content all the time on this show, and it's very practical. But what I found in your book is that this is actually very practical from a standpoint of personal development when it comes to building wealth. I mean, we're in this healthcare crisis right now. Obviously, a lot of people, not only do they have healthcare issues, but a lot of people out of work, a lot of people with less work, a lot of businesses shut down from a wealth standpoint, and completely out of their control. And so what we're talking about is ways to actually bring control back into your life during a pandemic. And to me, that's a little piece of magic, Radha, that you bring. So if we can, let's start with the one that always comes to my mind is let's start with cancer. But you talk about how you've got to have this genetic predisposition first, right? And then
Yep.
And then there's got to be an emotional reception. You've got to be receptive to the illness. Am I saying that right?
Yes, and I think rather than a reception, the emotional component of that sort of weakens your predisposition further and make it easy for the disease to manifest. So whether the disease will manifest or not depends on your most of your emotional component and how deep and how strong that emotional component is within you. So, for example, if you look at it, so the entire premise, Tom, is the fact that, look, we live in a world that is surrounded by a lot of triggers, a lot of stressors, and you can control that. And then, so it's like if you're on a sailboat and you're in the ocean, when that becomes turbulent, do you really want to control the ocean or you want to control the sail? The first and foremost, your success depends on controlling the sail. And that's the way I look at health, and I'm sure that that's the way that you look at wealth. And your glass analogy is controlling the sail. Once you control the sail, everything else seems much easier to go. So in that respect, if you look at our internal emotions, that plays out 24/7, with the exception of when you sleep. It is always in us, and as Blair Singer would say, the little voice, and I call it internal dialogue. And some people, and it's widely known as internal monologue. I disagree with the monologue part of it, but it is an internal dialogue. But we can argue about the terminology, but at the end of the day, it's what you tell yourself, right, which is going to determine how successful or how failure you are going to become. So cancer, as you brought it up, when we looked at patients who came for transplants of different organs, and including bone marrow transplant and cancer, when you interview them, an interesting pattern emerged. And that pattern is all of them have a sense of, I am not worthy. And for somewhere along the line in their life, whether it is childhood, early childhood, teenage, early adulthood, or even, sometimes seniors, they have been made to feel that they are not worthy of living. Now that nidus, internal dialogue, if they did not get rid of it by either doing emotional cleansing by means of counseling or processing or something else, they did not face that. It sits like a seed at the depth of their mind and undermines their longevity by leading to diseases that prematurely end your life. And in cancer, we felt, looking at the patients, that was the I'm not worthy. Now, I'm sure you can draw a very good parallel with regard to I'm not worthy in the space of wealth.
Well, for sure, and thank you for that, Radha. So, I've actually, I've learned this in my own life. Okay, so if you think about your life and you think about where you are financially, and you want to get higher financially, we almost all have a glass ceiling. Okay, yeah. But it's a ceiling we set on ourselves. And listening to you, and in what I've observed in my own life, I think that glass ceiling we set by our being worthy. Are we worthy to be? Are we worthy to be wealthy? Are we? For example, I found myself a couple of times, and only in the last few years, through a lot of, like you said, processing and counseling and so forth, and really recognizing this in myself, have I been able to break through this barrier. And what happened is I would do really well, and then I would basically give all the money away, not on purpose, but But the reality is I would go back to where I was, or just a little bit better than where I was, and I kept building, coming down, building, coming down. I'm going, and I kept asking myself, why couldn't I get through that barrier? And what I finally realized was there's definitely this worthiness. Am I worthy? Is it okay to be rich? There's a lot of dialogue right now that being rich is bad. And I think that's a horrible, horrible dialogue. Okay. Being poor is bad. Being rich is not bad. If everybody were rich, we would not be having this dialogue. Okay. So this is not a dialogue about the rich being rich. It's a dialogue about the poor being poor. And so what our mission is at Wealthability is to give people control over their ability to create wealth. Well, part of that control comes internally, right? I mean, part of that control is learning how to get past that, in this case, a worthiness issue, but we're going to go into some of these other illnesses that also have corollaries from a wealth standpoint. But I think that worthiness is a big one. That's why I wanted to start with that one, Radha, is because for myself, that's been a major issue. And once I got past that, it's just had a huge impact. And what I have to keep in mind is that it's always there, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not like one day you feel unworthy and the next day you feel worthy. I mean, this is a constant process we work on. I know that you do a lot of meditation, for example, and yoga. My wife, you know very well, Luann, she does a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga. People will walk into a room with Luann and they'll go, I want to be like her. I mean, and you have that same energy, Radha, I know. And that's really where, okay, can we have that peace so that we're not feeling like, wow, we can't have this. We're not worthy of this. We're not worthy of health. We're not worthy of wealth. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolute sense. And I think that question of, not worthy is what is the impediment, the barrier to breaking that glass ceiling that you talked about. Emotions, it's very interesting. And as human beings, we have, our inner self is built on 5 levels. But one of my biggest teaching points to anybody that I talk to is you cannot control your own circumstances if you cannot control yourself within. So if you can control yourself, who you are within, then you have all the power to control the outside. So, I mean, if you look at it that way, then the next question is, controlling within. What are you talking about? A lot of patients are like, what are you really talking about? We break that down into 5 different levels, and your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and then of course finally an unknown level that we all possess, but we ignore that 5th level, the unknown level. Having said that, the emotion is in the middle. I mean, I created in the second opinion a triangle that puts all these levels. The emotion's in the middle. There's a reason why it's in the middle. It's in the middle because this is the most powerful level of a human being. Emotions can either break you or make you. So, and all what we talk about here, like for example, I'm not worthy, or other internal dialogues that lead to other diseases, is stemming from that emotional plane. And if we can control that emotional plane, as it separates the spirit from the mental level, you're able to actually gain access to the spiritual level and finally to the universal level. So if you talk about emotional intelligence, in fact, controlling the emotional intelligence and working on it really gets you to spiritual intelligence and then universal intelligence. Once you hit universal intelligence, you're all open for success.
So when you talk about that and you talk to your patients, what do you tell them to do? I know one of the things that you and my doctors tell me all the time is that one of the ways to be able to control that is through meditation. Why do you talk so much about meditation? Why is that such a practical answer?
The meditation has several benefits, Tom, but in this regard, the first thing that meditation does, it dissociates yourself from your own emotions. And I don't mention that in a pathological fashion. You don't have a dissociative disorder. But what it does is it allows you to objectively look at your own emotions and not get caught up in it. That's the first thing meditation does, because that is one of the process of meditation is letting go. So we get caught up in emotions because we get caught up in emotion. We are then circling in that emotion and making decisions, emotional decisions, just like having emotional eating. So if you can become very objective about your own emotions, then you can make a much better decision as to how to not just handle the emotion, but what kind of decision you are going to make in your life. And that has tremendous repercussions in moving forward, whether it's in the health or wealth aspect.
That makes total sense. So you talk about letting go. Okay, let's talk about heart disease, because this is a big one, and it's particularly been raised big because of COVID. The numbers keep coming back that people with heart challenges have major challenges with this COVID-19. So what's the emotion? What is that is the trigger for heart disease?
The heart disease trigger, the internal dialogue is, I am not loved enough. So these are patients and individuals who feel they are not adequately loved or they lack love. In reality, they may have people around them and they may be loving, but it's just within themselves they feel they are not loved. There are other folks who are truly not have the love, but there are folks who are loved by others, but in their mind they cannot accept it, that they are worthy of loving. So it's at the end of the day, they all mixes together. But the predominant feeling is I'm not loved enough. So the emotion attached to heart is love, and out of that emotion arises some degree of fear, but fear is not always associated with heart. But that is the internal dialogue. So for example, I can give you a personal experience. I'm a cardiologist myself. I live the life of a cardiologist. I did everything I tell my patients. I ate right. I did yoga. I did acupuncture, everything, exercise. You call it. I don't smoke, no drinks, nothing except social alcohol drinking. But at age 44, I had a heart attack myself. I mean, you can look at the leading cardiologists and say, Mr. Cardiologist had a heart attack. That would be the sign for my patients to leave me and go somewhere else, because how can you be a cardiologist telling them and doing the same thing you're telling your patients and fail yourself? That's what opened my eyes, and I went inside myself and looked at and explored what my thought process is, and which is same as what I found out with my transplant patients. You're not loved enough, and that is one of the things that I constantly had at the back of my mind, and had to work on it. But interestingly enough, 50% of the patients who have a heart attack will have another heart attack sooner, within a couple of years. I haven't had a heart attack in 14 years. And the reason for that is I worked on my internal dialogue and made changes. So, it pans out to be true no matter how we look at it.
Yeah, and I look at this, and I equate this somewhat. For me, it's about approval, right? So I call myself an approval whore because I've learned through a lot of counseling and so forth that approval is a big deal to me, right? Words of affirmation, the 5 love languages, that great book. Mine is, words of affirmation, right? I want that approval. This is the seeking that love, that affirmation, that affirmation that yes, you're loved. And what I find is as I look back on my financial health, that seeking that approval has constantly caused me financial issues. Okay, that if you look at when I look at really wealthy people, okay, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all of these guys, Elon Musk, you never see them saying, "I want approval," not even once. They're not seeking approval. They don't need approval. Okay. Right. They're not feeling this lack of love. And if they were, then guess what? They would have this issue, right? They'd have this issue with money as well as with health. And to me, that's where that connects is, wow, if we, if we can get past that, then guess what? Now it just, like you say, it's letting go. So we're no longer worried about it. We're just doing it. It's just what it is. And you mentioned that it is what it is. There are things we can control, which is ourselves, and things we can't control, which is the world. So let's go to another one. What's another emotion that that might trigger a particular health issue?
Take kidney, for example, and patients who have required kidney transplantation pass through our institution and our clinic for cardiac clearance, and we had the opportunity to observe them. Most of the patients who required kidney transplantation had end-stage kidney disease, had this internal dialogue of, I need to be taken care of. They acted as if they are children. It has nothing to do with them. When you observe them, it almost feels like you need to take care of them than them taking care of themselves. So they sort of regressed. That kind of internal dialogue making you regress in personality is what manifested as a predominant personality in patients with kidney disease.
So is this the same as like a victim mentality, this victimhood?
Yes, there is a victim mentality in there. I mean, I think cancer also has some degree of victim mentality. So if you look at it, if you really tease out these different feelings and emotions, there are like lots of gradations of these emotions, and there is overlap. But what you can see is victim kind of thinking process with I need to be taken care of, childlike behavior is what predominates. Now, imagine, would you or could you become a successful entrepreneur if you had that kind of I need to be taken care of mentality?
That would be the biggest no ever, Radha. That's why, of course, that's what's going through my mind and our listeners is that, if you're a victim, you have no control, and basically you want other people to take control of your life. I mean, this is why people don't open their investment statements when they come from their broker, right? Just you take care of it. Okay, you hear athletes say, my guy handles that. Okay, my person handles that. And we'll actually have people at Wealthability, we'll have them come to us and say, look, I don't want to deal with this. You just handle it. And I'm going, well, in my business, I can't. Okay, because if I'm not working with you, I can tell you what to do, but I can't do it. Okay, it's very much, from my standpoint, I'm in a way, a wealth physician, a tax physician, because what I'm telling you is I can diagnose it, like you diagnose a heart issue, and I can tell you exactly what you need to do, but unless you're willing to take control and do it, there is nothing I can do. I mean, I can't change your taxes. All I can do is report what you do. I can't change what you do. So, I always say that if you want to change your tax, you have to change your facts. But you have to change it. I can't do that for you. So if you're feeling that, I need somebody to take care of me, that's, and I sometimes think of the champagne socialists, right? And they go, well, we need to take care of these people. No, what we need to do is we need to give them the tools to take care of themselves. Okay, do they need proper health care? Absolutely. That's a huge crisis in our country especially. Do they need that? For sure. At the same time, do they need the education? Do they need to be able to build themselves and take care of themselves so they go, oh, wait a minute, I could actually do this myself. A perfect example, we were talking earlier and I was saying, my doctor, who you know very well, she comes to my house. Now, my wife and I are very much at risk for the virus and COVID. And so, and we would be both of us would be very sick. I was in the hospital earlier this year with the flu, and my wife is an asthmatic. So this is serious stuff to us. I mean, we don't go out very much. We always wear masks. We won't go anywhere where everybody else isn't wearing a mask. I mean, that's how important this is to us. But here's what we know is that our doctor, we share a primary care physician, comes to our house to give us vitamin infusions, comes to our house to help us, comes to our house. And guess what? Those visits and everything, they're not paid for by insurance. I mean, those are out-of-pocket costs. And so the fact that we can afford that means that we have better health care. One of the scariest things to me about this whole virus has been, what if I have to go to the hospital? We actually know somebody who got COVID in the hospital. They went in for something else and got COVID in the hospital. I'm going, that is not where I want to be. And right now we're seeing this big increase in cases. We're seeing hospitals starting to get overwhelmed again. And, the great thing for us is, our doctor's been very clear. I'll come. I'll take care of you. You'll be fine. We won't get you to the hospital. It would have to be a horrible, result for us to ever get you to the hospital. And I'm going, I can do that. We can do that because we have the wealth, the financial capability of doing that. But we've always thankful. My wife and I, we're both entrepreneurs. We both have our own businesses. We both control our own livelihood. And to me, this idea of giving up control, and I'm a bit of a control freak, I guess, but the idea of giving up control to somebody else, while I want to let go of all the things that are that are interfering, all that internal dialogue, I don't want to give somebody else control over my life.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. It's interesting you say that because while patients with kidney disease they almost give up control and have everybody else and expect the world to take care of them, and the control it's a two-edged sword. So if you looked at it, and then if you live in an environment where you have a persistent sense of lack of control, that actually predisposes to diabetes. It is an interesting play. And then if you looked at diabetes causes kidney disease. So you can see the interplay and sort of cyclical function of these constant emotions that's playing within your mind, unless taken care of. It's going to take a lot of your energy, prevent you from becoming successful, and then prevent clarity of thinking. And then if you don't have clarity of thinking, your decision-making process is affected. And then you end up making decisions that are not optimal for you, and then have this seesaw effect of, winning, losing, instead of having winning, getting and breaking that glass ceiling you were talking about.
So one of the, before we wrap up here, one of the, I think, great benefits of this pandemic, and I'm a bit of an optimist, I tend to, I mean, I think taxes are a way to build wealth. So I pretty much see the world through rose-colored glasses. Well, I think one of the benefits that I keep hearing from people I associate with, particularly entrepreneurs, is that this pandemic's given everybody a chance to reassess themselves, reassess where they are. What's really important to me? And to me, this is a time when we can do exactly what you're talking about. This is something where we can actually take some steps to take back control of our health. And it's not just losing weight. I mean, I love that Boris Johnson in the UK, you know, he got COVID pretty early on. He was pretty sick, and he's lost a lot of weight. He looks great. It's really impacted him. And I think if we take this opportunity to really think about this. So my question for you, Radha, is, can you give us, okay, meditation is one thing that we can absolutely do to help our being, okay? And I'm a huge believer. Can you give us a couple of other practical things? What can we actually do over the next few weeks and months to make an impact on this being and this emotion, this emotional intelligence, if you will?
Yeah. So great question, Tom. I mean, I think it's easier to think in two ways. I divide that into two things. You know, you have your physical actions and physical body, and you have your thinking process and your mental emotional body and mental emotional intelligence. So what you can do, the things that are easier to do, is one of them is one of the areas that affect our emotional intelligence is our eating habits and food, and how we reach out to food when we are in different emotions and different foods taste good. You are emotionally driven to eat, and when you have conflicts. So physical cleanse. So essentially, one of the easiest thing to do is to start cleansing yourself. As you said, the pandemic, it's like a tap on the shoulder. It gives you an opportunity for those who survive to re-look at what they have been doing and create a new chapter.
So you're talking about a basic detox, right? I mean, even one of these most basic 4 or 5 day detox programs that you can pretty much buy at Target, right? That you can even do that. I mean, I know you guys do much bigger ones, but even something like that, would it be helpful?
I think that'll be a great start because you have to. This is about training yourself to start a new lifestyle, a new pathway. And you're changing the facts. As you say, you want facts, you change the facts. You have to change the facts about health, and which will in turn change yourself. So yes, small detox to start with, and then progress in that respect to longer and longer ones, so that you can actually affect what we call neuroplasticity. That means change in yourself. It takes an average of 18 days to 258 days to change yourself. So different individuals falls in that spectrum at different length of time. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it at the first time for 258 days. It can be a cumulative effect. So the first thing is doing a physical cleanse and starting small so that you become a small winner, and that reinforces your action rather than initial failure and then you give up and go back to what you were doing. So I always encourage people, start small, do something simple, and observe how you feel and how you function. If you really like how you feel and how you function, go for the next step. Don't stop there. So that's on the physical side. The second thing you can do is what is called emotional cleanse, which is about handling your emotions and mental acuity and mental thinking process and clarity of thinking. That is where the meditation comes in. That's one area of it. Meditation helps, which is something you can do yourself, 15 to 20 minutes a day. That's all it takes. I mean, imagine we can always cut down watching TV and then do 20 minutes of meditation. There's time. It's about budgeting time for that. But there are other things you can do, which might involve, paying money. I'm not sure insurance doesn't always cover it. The interesting aspect of insurance is if you don't have a disease, medical insurance won't cover the treatment. But disease has nothing to do with being healthy. So you won't have a disease, you want to be healthy, but insurance won't pay for it. You have to pay it out of your pocket, just like you are doing in your life to be at peak potential. So you can go for counseling and processing and other areas of emotional cleansing to let go of all these redundant baggages that is within us.
So one last thing that is big to me, because it's makes such a big difference in my life, and that's exercise. Because exercise is free. Okay,
Yes.
you can go running, you can go walking, you can, a bicycle is not very expensive. I mean, there's a lot of inexpensive exercise. What impact does that have? Because I can tell you from a financial standpoint what it does for me. And I'm spoiled. I have a 25-meter pool in my backyard. So, and I'm a swimmer. But I find that when I'm swimming, for one thing, it clears my mind. But the other thing is it sharpens my senses so that it's easier for me to see obstacles. It's easier for me to have that emotional intelligence because I can see a lot more clearly. I presume that's actually a real thing, right?
It is. So exercise, if you exercise for more than 25 minutes in one setting, moderate exercise, it has been shown to be beneficial in scientific studies. Exercise actually affects both sides that I just mentioned, physical cleanse and emotional cleanse. And how does it do? I mean, on the physical side, you have to sweat, your internal organs have to function faster and rapidly and eliminate toxins. So you're actually detoxing your body every day when you exercise, especially aerobic exercise. And then mentally, we secrete, the brain secretes endorphins and other hormones that are happy hormones. We call it happy hormones. It makes you happier, makes you feel more optimistic and more energetic. And so then your thinking process becomes much more clear. So imagine, I can't think of a day, if I don't exercise, I always feel that. The next day I'm sluggish. But when I say exercise, the next day is like I'm going at it. I have more energy, more clarity, more thinking process, and feel lighter. So as you pointed out, you're right on the spot about the benefits of exercise. And it is free and it is relatively cheap. I just don't know why we don't do it all the time.
Well, I have to admit, I grew up swimming competitively. I love doing that. And I know some people don't love doing it. And I can't imagine that because I do love the endorphins. I will admit, I fully love the endorphins. I love how it makes me feel. I just enjoy it. So, I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a household where everybody exercised, everybody swam. All my brothers were swimmers. And so this was a natural thing for us. And I grew up playing tennis and, golf and swimming and running and biking and hiking, all these kinds of things. And I'm going, and of course we're fortunate, you and I, because we live in Arizona. So the weather's always okay. I mean, even when it's hot, 5 o'clock in the morning, it's still okay to do a run or a swim at 5 o'clock in the morning. So there's always a time to do this. I just want to thank you, Radha. Radha, I know how busy you are. Last thing, where would we find more information about Second Opinion and what we can do here?
The Second Opinion is sold at every, you can find any bookstore that sells books. It's available. You can order it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And order it through our practice, Ultra Healthy Human. No matter how you can order it from there. And then finally, my next book is about health. Actually, it's called Survival. It is actually piggybacking on this tap on the shoulder we talked about with the pandemic, and that will be released in January. It's called Survival. That actually gives not just context that you talked about earlier in the show. It also gives you some content and about 8 steps how to start this. The last question you just asked me, give me some steps that I can do. It goes into that it condenses into 8 steps. Awesome. And then a reader can just easily do it without having to reach out to anybody else.
That's awesome. Dr. Radha Gopalan, thank you so much for being with us. Please, I hope everybody, listen to this, watch it over and over again, because having this understanding of how we build our health is so applicable to building wealth. And the reality is that, yes, there are some things that are free, but unless you're building wealth, it is tough to get good health care. Not all doctors are alike. Okay, I know that very well. Not all vitamins are alike, or the same quality. Not everything is as good as it is when you have the money to get the very best. And we notice that the people who have done well, even though they've gotten sick with COVID-19, they've been taken care of. They've got good health care. And a lot of the poor and those people without good health care have not had that benefit. So it's my encouragement to everybody that, you know what, as you learn these things, just take a couple of small steps. I'm a huge believer in meditation. I meditate. I'm a huge believer in the exercise. I'm a huge believer in what Dr. Gopalan is talking about. And I know that when you do these things, you're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Wealth Ability Show with Tom Wheelwright. Way more money, way less taxes. To learn more, go to wealthability.com.